Hey, friends, and welcome to the 8:30 Live, continuing to be at 9 p.m. And also, I forgot that I'm not supposed to do these on like weekends or Fridays, but I'm here anyway. Oh, YouTube just kicked in. Right, 8:30 Live at 9. So I forgot I'm not supposed to do these on Fridays or weekends, so I'm definitely tomorrow or Sunday. So the next time we'll see each other is Monday. But it's fine because there's some really, really important stuff going on. Like, I posted about it twice successively. That's how important the thing that's going on is, and we'll get to that. It's the, you know what? Let's just go to it. I mean, people haven't tuned in yet, which is why I don't want to bring it up right now. But like, what's going on in Portland, Oregon, is absolutely terrifying, and the very worst fears that anybody could have about a Trump administration gone wild and becoming authoritarian is going on and is alive on the West Coast. But we'll get to that in a second because I want to see who tunes in, and then we'll handle it. Hey, Simon, how's it going? Always a pleasure to see you. So I think just to kick things off slow, Dianne Feinstein made an announcement the other day that she was planning to she was planning to propose an amendment to the next coronavirus stimulus package, which we have no idea what it's going to be. Propose an amendment that would prohibit stimulus funds from going to states that don't have laws requiring mandatory masks. Now, this had mixed reviews when I shared it, but I think ultimately, as sort of strident and baller as it may seem to say that states without mask laws should not receive stimulus funding because effectively they're prolonging the problem or making it worse, it is cruel, and that is not that's not how the union's supposed to work. Ultimately, we are supposed to have compassion for every citizen, and all of the resources of the country are there to provide support for all of the people who are hurting. And so saying that states without mask laws shouldn't receive federal funding to help people who don't have jobs, who might not be able to afford masks, who are on the verge of eviction and homelessness, that's I don't think that's the right tack. However, what we could do instead is simply decide that the stimulus funding is for things like masks for everyone, reconfiguring workplaces, providing PPE and barriers, all of the things that we've spoken about a million times. Now, I think that there should be another stimulus directly to taxpayers, well, really to residents of the United States, and maybe an extension of that extra $600 for unemployment insurance. That might even be the way to do it. But if we're talking about a big stimulus package, and again, we have no idea what this is supposed to look like, or no idea what the plan is. If we're going to get one of those, anything that is beyond giving direct relief and aid to people who are in dire straits should be put towards PPE and other mitigation efforts that is effectively infrastructure to make our economy more resilient to pandemics. None of this bailout nonsense for corporations, even paycheck prevention, even paycheck protection programs. That's not where the money should go, because the problem isn't that businesses aren't hiring people, or it's not that businesses don't have enough money to hire people. It's that nobody wants to go outside. Nobody feels safe. Business can't run effectively unless we protect people against the virus. So that, I think, is the better way of requiring people to take masks seriously with federal funding, not to restrict who has access to it, but to curtail severely what it can be used for, so that it's used for things that actually slow or halt the spread of the pandemic. Okay, so let's just get to what's going on in Oregon, because it is terrifying. So you might have seen this, but essentially, And we're probably going to end up talking about this on Monday since it's Friday and not so many folks are tuning in. But I'm here, and this is what's important. There are federal police agents. So, as you may know, and we've spoken about this before, the federal government is not the main source of policing in the United States. Local government, almost all of the police in the U.S. The federal government really only has 3 branches that deals with policing: the FBI for across state crimes, Custom and Border Patrols, which is law enforcement for custom and border issues, and ICE, which picks up immigrants. So apparently there are federal police agents operating in Portland, Oregon to, quote, defend federal land. So these would be federal buildings, federal statues, and what have you. But they have simply been going around in unmarked uniforms, in unmarked cars, snatching people off the street whenever they basically think they look suspicious. So this is a pretty bold claim because it's effectively a secret police service. It is, and you know, when I was a kid, I used to wonder, like, what does secret police mean? What makes a secret police secret? Because, you know, it's not a secret that the secret police exist. Everybody knows the secret police exist. What makes the secret police secret? The secret police are police that you don't know who they are. And so you can never hold them accountable, and you can never do anything about the actions they take. And they spy on you. In any event, there have been many, many recorded instances of unmarked cars rolling up, opening, a team of 4 or 5 militarily uniformed individuals jumping out without any identifying insignia or name tags, snatching people off the street and hauling them away. Now, NPR, I posted 2 articles about, that's how insane this is. I posted 2 articles about this, one of which from NPR actually told this tale of a man named Pettibone. And Pettibone was picked up and he gave a recounting of what happened. So first, they picked him up off the street and just drove him around for a while, finally bringing him to a detention center, which he had no idea where it was. He was in a van with 4 or 5 armed men, which then took him to this detention center where he continued to be surrounded by armed men. They pulled his beanie down over his head so he couldn't see what was going on and detained him for hours. They drove him around downtown, took him to the detention facility, and then began to interrogate him. They went through all of his personal belongings without a warrant, which is unconstitutional. And then, only after arriving at the detention center, came and read him his Miranda rights, which also, I'm pretty sure, is unconstitutional. You are to be read your rights when you are arrested. And an officer cannot detain you, let alone 5 officers, if you are not officially under arrest. And you have rights when you're under arrest. After the officers came and read him his rights, they asked if he would waive his rights and whether he would answer a few questions. He said no, demanded his attorney, because one of the Miranda rights is you have the right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to you. The others being you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. And I forget actually what the last Miranda right is, which is sad because I did an entire 7th grade project on, I had to present on the Miranda case and determine whether it was right or wrong. Obviously it was right. In any event, after he refused to waive his right to an attorney, they ceased questioning him, held him for another hour and a half, and then released him without any record of his arrest or the officers or department which had arrested him. This is exactly what the SA existed for in Nazi Germany and what the KGB existed for in Soviet Russia. Again, the secret police is really about you not being able to hold the police accountable, not that the police are secret. Everybody knows the secret police exist. It's just that you can't do anything about them. This is incredibly disturbing. You just imagine this happening where you are. People randomly being picked up because maybe they're considered a protester or a political dissenter. Imagine this happening on election day, where people waiting to vote are simply rounded up and hauled away because they are identified as political dissenters and potentially violent. Again, there was no probable cause in this case. They literally just picked somebody up because they felt like it, gave that person no reason for an arrest, no paperwork about the arrest so they could prove that they had been arrested and hold these police accountable, and did not provide any information about who they were. They simply snatched somebody, kidnapped somebody off the street, and took them to a detention center. This first, when the government does this, it is a complete abrogation of freedom and civil liberties, and an undermining of the democracy. I hope that much is obvious. Then, as a tool for voter intimidation and preventing participation, there is no greater tool in the hands of a dictator, because it allows them to use force to target their political opponents. And yeah, even if they release you after the fact, if you have a 1-hour lunch break to go vote and you're detained for 5 hours for no reason, what are the odds of you going back to vote? What are the odds of you even keeping your job? That sort of intimidation keeps people from engaging in the civic life of a democracy. Then there's an additional problem, which is that when you have completely unmarked law enforcement, anybody can pretend to be law enforcement. I honestly wouldn't put it past Trump supporters to start rolling around in unmarked cars, because an unmarked car is easy to get. A governmentally marked car is difficult to get, and rolling out in camo gear and just abducting people and preventing them from voting or protesting or doing whatever it is that is their right in this country. And because the situation is such that the actual official government officials don't have to give you any information, there'll be no way to tell who is official and who is not. Either way, they're violating your rights. And no way to hold anybody accountable, official or otherwise. And that is what the SA were for. The SS was the sort of shock troops of the Nazi Party. The SA were a bunch of thugs who went around under the banner of the Nazi Party, roughing people up. I honestly, this is such a dangerous situation, because presumably if people try to resist arrest, they're going to be shot. If other people try to help them, they're going to be shot. But what legitimacy have these people to just come by and start throwing folks in a van? None. Absolutely zero. There are rules when you're a police officer. There's a reason police officers wear badges. I don't know. The abrogation of human rights happening in this country right now, and civil rights, and the general tenets of democracy, so disheartening. We really need to win this election, and we need people to be brave to win this election, because at this point, I think it's pretty clear that we will face physical, violent intimidation from Trump supporters and even elements of the government itself, intent on maintaining their unearned power. All right, there's a few comments, and then I think we'll just call it early night, because there's not so many folks tuning in, but it's a beautiful Friday in the summer. Has the senator from Oregon made any statements? I saw Senator Warren made a statement. There have been several statements. In fact, there was a federal prosecutor who launched an investigation into claims that some folks had been detained without probable cause. Now, probable cause, that's actually what the Miranda case was about. There was a police officer who saw somebody walking around the block a few times and thought this guy Miranda, and thought that he was suspicious looking, and decided to just arrest him for no real reason and search him. Miranda sued for a violation of his civil liberties, and ultimately the Supreme Court sided with Miranda. And then the the cop interrogated him without offering him a lawyer or any of these things. This is before the time when cops had to tell you that you had these rights. Miranda sued for a violation of his civil liberties, and this is what established the requirement of probable cause, which is, again, just words, but it does create a standard, and there's a rubric by which to judge whether something is or satisfies probable cause. You can't just say somebody looks sketchy, and so I think that I'm going to arrest them. So there's been action by a federal prosecutor on this, and there have been several statements by elected officials and the ACLU. But ultimately, statements are nice, but they don't do much. What we need is for the federal government to stop doing this sort of nonsense, for somebody to be held accountable, ideally removed from a position of power. And if you ask me, there should be a law passed immediately that any officer of the law who is concealing their identifying information should be immediately stripped of their position. And if they undertake an entire arrest, violating due process, violating the Miranda rights, or concealing their identity, they should be imprisoned. This is not something to joke around with. We need to make it beyond just you can't be an officer anymore. There should be criminal consequences for this level of violating people's civil rights. And people might say, oh, they're cops and they're told to do it. Following orders is not an excuse. People in the army are told not to obey unlawful orders. And they're told they swear allegiance to the Constitution, not to the president, not to anything other than the Constitution. And we all have constitutional rights. Statements are all well and good, but we need legislation. And honestly, I said it when Trump was first doing all of his, when Trump was first talking about using ICE to pick up immigrants, and then detain them without trial. This was an actual thing that he attempted and talked about doing, detaining immigrants. I said that the New York City Police Department should go and take over any detention center which was depriving people of their due process rights. Well, I'm afraid to say it, that the police will not take the side of citizens, and will not take the side of civil rights, and will not take the side of local government. But there should be an organized police force which, when things like this happen on the street, they intervene and prevent it from happening. Now, this might cause a constitutional crisis, but that's fine. I'm fine with a constitutional crisis. I'm fine with having the question asked whether or not federal agents can pick up and detain anybody in the United States without probable cause, hold them without trial, release them without any evidence of having been detained or any redress, any avenue for redress. I'm ready for that trial, and I'm ready for that to go to the Supreme Court, and I'm ready to fight that fight. But if our local law enforcement won't stand up to federal law enforcement, then it's going to be incumbent on us as citizens to intervene in these moments. And that's an incredibly dangerous and scary idea, because these people who do the abducting have guns, and most of the rest of us, particularly in urban centers, don't. I really wish it weren't coming to this, but the government says and claims that these folks are out there because protesters are violent. But at the end of the day, they're the ones who are making a situation which requires violence to solve the problem, because nobody should have to go willingly and quietly into a van without knowing who's abducting them, why, where they're going, and what their rights are, and whether those rights will be respected. And you cannot count on anybody to respect your rights if later on you can't count on the ability to hold them accountable. It's just absolutely insane. Now, the the response to concealing identities is that people, folks have been doxing law enforcement officers, and that's bad. But you know what? I don't care. That is not a rationale for completely violating the capacity of citizens to hold law enforcement accountable. All police officers should be considered public officials. They are officers of the law. They represent the government. And if they don't want to be in a capacity where they might be held accountable, then they shouldn't be police officers. Now, I do, of course, understand the idea that you don't want mob rule either. You don't want people who think that police are bad just finding out who police are and then targeting them personally for the job that they're trying to do. It's not that police don't perform an important function in our society. It's just that right now there's a lot of tension, and many of them happen to be performing it poorly. Whether that comes down to the individual officer or it is a decision of higher ups to be militant and aggressive, I suppose we could ask. But either way, the risk of law enforcement being doxxed is, I think, part and parcel with being a representative. Without the capacity to hold law enforcement accountable and know who it is that's doing the arresting, we are giving up so much of our civil liberties. It's not to be tolerated. Than allowing them to conceal their identity while they snatch people off the street. Why are you wearing a sweater? It's just part of the gimmick, Al. It's just part of the gimmick. In any event, that covers everything, and it's Friday, and so not a lot of people are watching. So I'm out. Al, if you're around, let me know. I'll see you all later. Monday, not over the weekend. Monday at 9.